Hello again and welcome to another Mordy and Glory Old World video. In today's episode we shall be casting our ever critical eye over another Old World unit. And this time we will be delving deep into the Dwarven Mountainholds with a review of Longbeards. Now, those of you that follow this channel know that I started off Old World really getting into the Empire. But the more that I have been looking at the dwarves, the more that I have found myself leaning into that faction. And one of the units that has been critical to this change of view, to this change of love, this change of heart, has been the Longbeards. I have found them to be an incredibly good unit and one that I am really excited to take you guys through today. And so without further ado, let's grumble whilst drinking our ale, pick up our axes, and diggy hole right into today's episode. Now, as is tradition, let us begin with an overview of the Longbeards, and we'll begin with the stat line. Each Longbeard comes with a movement of 3, which is fairly standard for your dwarf infantry. They have a weapon skill of 5, which is very remarkable and is your first indicator that these guys ain't just fancy dwarf warriors. Weapon skill 5 is a big deal, not to be dismissed. They've got a blitz skill of 3, although you won't be using that. A base strength of 4. Again, that is an increase over a lot of your standard dwarves. If you compare the guys, dwarf warriors, you've got better weapon skill and you've got better strength now. They are T4, which is normal for dwarves, and they've got 1 wound, initiative 2, which is fairly normal, 1 attack, leadership 9, and they come in at 12 points a pop, which does make them 4 points more than your standard dwarf warrior, but I think it's well worth it for that extra weapon skill and that extra strength. I think that is well worth the extra 4 points. Now, your Longbeards have the troop type heavy infantry, which means it does take a little bit more for them to be disrupted from a flank attack. They come on 25 by 25mm bases, and they have a unit size of 5+. So there's no maximum, you can take as many as you want, but you have to have a minimum of 5 of them. As standard, they come with hand weapons and heavy armor. Let me just say that heavy armor makes me very, very jealous as an Empire player. I wish I got units that came with heavy armor as standard, but I don't. As for their weapon options, Longbeards can take great weapons at 1 point per model, and they can take shields at 1 point per model. Now, you can take both of those. However, I think that logic would dictate you should go for one or the other. If you take great weapons, it means you can't use the shields in combat. So if you take the shields as well, the only benefit to taking both is that you would have a 4 save from shooting. Now, that might be worth it if your local meta consists of a lot of people who have got shooting armies like wood elves and stuff. That could be a good reason to take both. But I think if you're looking at Longbeards, you probably want to go for the great weapons if you want to be chopping and doing lots of damage and have them as a real damage output kind of unit. Or if you want something that can just hold and take a charge, you should probably look at just taking the shields. Now, out of the two, which one do I think I would go for? Would I go for great weapons or shields? I'm leaning towards great weapons. The reason is because I think there are better brick tank units out there for dwarves, like Iron Breakers. But I think being able to put great weapons on a weapon skill 5 unit for just 1 point, that's the niche that I think Longbeards really fulfill, and I think it's definitely something you shouldn't overlook for them. Moving on from the weapon options, you can also take your full command. Now, you get a musician, a standard bearer, and an elder who is your unit champion. All of these cost 6 points each, and they all do the usual thing. For example, the elder gets an extra attack in close combat. Any unit of Longbeards may take up to 50 points of standard runes as well. What's interesting is this isn't 0 to 1 per 1,000. This is just any unit of Longbeards can have basically a magical standard. On top of this, your elder may take 25 points of weapon runes, and he may take 25 points of talismanic runes as well. Now, if you're wondering what runes you would potentially put on this unit champion, it's important to note that the talismanic rune, the Rune of Passage, is only 5 points. And the bearer of a Rune of Passage gains the Move Through Cover special rule, and any unit joined by the bearer also gains the Move Through Cover special rule. Now, dwarves are famously an army which can move quite slowly, and being slowed down further by terrain can be real frustration, especially if you end up playing on a narrative board, maybe lots of forests or something like that. So having that 5-point Rune of Passage, it's not a lot of points, but it might make the difference. It might allow your unit to just be able to be that slightly bit more maneuverable, which is something that dwarves often struggle with. There are lots of other runes you could take. There is the Rune of Furnace, which gives you a 3+ ward save against flaming attacks, but again, that's only for your 1 wound champion. You've got the Rune of Luck, which would allow you to reroll a single to hit or to wound or a single failed armor save, and that is single use, and that does cost 15 points. You've got the Rune of Warding, which gives you a 2+ save against a single wound, a 2+ ward save to be clear, and they're the only ones you can take for your 25 points. It would be cool if you could take a Rune of Spell Breaking, but that is for Anvil of Doom and Dwarf Runesmiths only, so sadly not. Otherwise, I think that would be the one to go for, frankly. Getting a cheeky Rune of Spell Breaking into the army isn't a bad thing at all. Sadly, it's not to be though, but we do have the weapon runes, and the weapon runes that cost 25 points or less are the Rune of Speed, the Rune of Fire, the Rune of Striking, the Rune of Cleaving, the Rune of Might, the Grudge Rune, and the Rune of Fury, and the Rune of Banishment. So those are your options if you want to give him some weapon runes, and my favourite one out of those is probably the Rune of Fury, but I do have a bit of a hard-on for the Rune of Fury, I have to say. If you're not sure what runes you want to take, my advice would be take none. Your runes are probably better spent on your characters. Make sure they've got all the runes you want first, and then come back to unit leaders that can take them, and at that point decide if it's worth putting them on, or if you've got the points spare for them in the first place. Now, the last option you have for your Longbeards is 0 to 1 unit per 1,000 points may have the Drilled special rule, and that will cost you 1 point per model. Drilled is a very powerful rule. It was recently FAQ'd, and what it allows you to do is get a free redress the ranks before you do any moving. So if you can see that the opponent's coming down at you and you think, damn, I might need to go a little bit wide here, I'll get my free redress the ranks and I'm going to march forward, you can do that. Or you could use it defensively and get a free redress the ranks, then move backwards a little bit. Drilled is powerful for 1 point per model. It's not a bad upgrade at all. As for your special rules, your Longbeards have Close Order, which means they get +1 to combat res, but do find it a bit tricky to go through terrain. They can get their ranks disrupted. They have Grumble weapons, which means if they are equipped with hand weapons, they will get to reroll 1s to hit, so you don't get that if you've got great weapons. You have Hatred Orcs and Goblins, which gives you full rerolls to hit in the first round of combat versus Orcs and Goblins. You have Magic Resistance -1, but that is the same for pretty much every dwarf unit. You have Resolute, which is what the dwarves get, which make it harder for them to pursue enemy units. You have Shield Wall, so as long as you are wielding your shields, if you've got great weapons and shields, you can't just sling the shields on your back and still do Shield Wall. You'd have to choose to have your shields out. But if Shield Wall means that if you would fall back in good order, you can just give ground instead. You have Venerable, which is the Longbeard special rule, which unless its unit is fleeing, friendly units within 6 inches of it can re-roll any failed panic test. Good if you've not gone for a BSB. And finally, you have Veteran, which means that the Longbeards themselves can re-roll leadership tests, but that does not include break checks. It's for other things like fear. Now, there's one more special rule, as it were, for the Longbeards that isn't mentioned on their unit entry. If your general is a king, 0 to 1 unit of Longbeards may be taken as a core choice. This is really, really good. This is probably the best bit about Longbeards. Your other core choices are Dwarf Warriors, which are okay, they're fine, they're cheap. They're not really going to kill very much. And you've got your Quarrelers and your Thunderers as well, which are ranged units. But even though dwarves like shooting things, it's always going to come down to the sharp end. For me, I think if I was looking at core, I'm always going to take a king as my as my general, because I think a Dwarf King on Shield Bearer is really, really good. And then having that ability to fill your core composition out with a unit like Longbeards is very, very viable, because you combine that with the fact that you could then get lots of special units like Hammerers and Iron Breakers, and you could essentially have a whole army that is going to consist of special or above units, because you can then take a big unit of your Longbeards as your core, and you can also take 0 to 1 unit of Rangers as core as well. And Rangers are a very, very good dwarf unit as well, which we'll be getting to in a future video. So I think that ability for your Longbeards to be taken as core is one of the best things about them, and one of the #1 reasons why you should take them. So now that we've gone through the Longbeards unit entry, the big question is, how should you include them in your army? What should the unit composition be? And I have found that taking Longbeards with a unit size of 24 is very effective. Firstly, it gives you the numbers to be able to grind through a few rounds of combat. And it also means that you can deploy either deep or wide. If you know that you're going to need that extra combat res, you can go in a 6x4 formation. That's not a problem whatsoever. But if you know that you want to be defensive and try and get as many attacks in, you can go wide in a 12x2 formation, if not wide, if you're willing to do a little bit of line hammer. And so you have the numbers, so when the enemy comes in, they'll cut down 3, 4, 5 of you, but you'll have plenty of attacks back. And remember, you are going to be taking the hit as dwarves, because typically your guns will force people to come to you, and then they will get the charge off on you. And you want to have a unit that has enough numbers to be able to absorb a blow and can go wide enough so that they can hit back effectively. As for the weapons you give this unit of Longbeards, I do recommend you go for great weapons. It's not really a big hit going down from initiative 2 to initiative 1, again, because you're typically going to be charged. And I have found that shields and great weapons is fine, but you don't take that much damage at range except for in extreme circumstances. And at that point, it's going to be your range units that are going to have to be picking up the slack there, rather than your Longbeards hoping that they can hide behind their shields. Also, if you just give them the great weapons, they're quite cheap. They're only 13 points per model, and 13 points for a weapon skill 5, strength 6, toughness 4, leadership 9 model is very, very good. In fact, in a funny sort of way, it makes them budget Chaos Warriors. Now, I know that's a little bit of a pivot there, so bear with me. Now, Chaos Warriors, I consider them to be the baseline for good combat infantry. A lot of people are going to disagree with me there, but there are other units that can out-specialize Chaos Warriors. There are some units that are going to have higher quality. There are some units that are going to have higher quantity. But when you think of a core unit that is good in combat, and typically peer-to-peer, so core-on-core combat, should have the upper hand, Chaos Warriors are one of those quintessential examples. You think of a Chaos Warrior versus the State Troop, right? Chaos Warriors are always going to have the upper hand. You think of the Chaos Warrior versus the Orc. Chaos Warrior, he's going to have that better weapon skill than the Orc, right? He is the top-tier core stat line. And when you look at a Chaos Warrior, it's very similar to a Dwarf Longbeard. Okay, they've got the better movement, but dwarves have got short legs. Sorry, but put it in the book. But then you've got weapon skill 5 is a weapon skill 5. You've got blitz skill 3 that no one's going to use on both units. You've got strength 4 base on both units, toughness 4 base on both units. And sure, the Chaos Warriors have the higher initiative, but the Chaos Warriors will be charging anyway, so it's kind of a moot point. And the Chaos Warriors are only leadership 8, whereas the Longbeards are leadership 9. And bear in mind that Longbeards are 12 points base and Chaos Warriors are 13 points base. And bear in mind, if you give those Chaos Warriors great weapons, it costs you 2 points per model. So a Chaos Warrior with a great weapon is 15 points a pop. A Longbeard with a great weapon is only 13 points. And in combat, They're basically the same. The only advantage the Chaos Warrior has, it is a big advantage, don't get me wrong. The only advantage the Chaos Warrior has is going to be, he's probably going to get the charge off first. Disadvantage is that the Chaos Warrior unit is probably going to be thinned out by things like organ guns and cannons and quarrelers and thunderers. So the Longbeards can go toe-to-toe with Chaos Warriors, and I have done this, by the way. This is not Theory Hammer. I had a unit of Longbeards go toe-to-toe with a unit of Chaos Warriors of Khorne. And bear in mind, those Chaos Warriors of Khorne actually cost 17 points per model. That's pretty good. I was saving 4 points a dude, and I went toe-to-toe, and I actually ended up winning that combat. So if you're not sure about Longbeards, you're still on the fence, one thing that I would say to try and convince you is, think of like the reputation Chaos Warriors and Warriors of Chaos in general have, and then think that you can get that reputation for significantly cheaper. However, let's come back and focus on the dwarves themselves for a moment. Let's just leave the warp spawn at the door for a second. Longbeards with great weapons are pretty good, but I know some veteran dwarf players are going to be saying, Mordian, if you're going for Longbeards with great weapons, you might as well be taking hammerers at that point. Hammers are a good unit. They have the same weapon skill, the same strength, the same stat line across the board, except they do have an extra initiative. And unlike Longbeards, they actually get to use their initiative because their great hammers are a unique weapon. They're not great weapons, they're a unique weapon. And they have the same overall thing as great weapons. They have +2 strength, -2 AP, but on top of that, they get armor bane, magical attacks, and the turn in which someone charges you, you get +1 attack and you get +1 initiative, which is huge because again, you're dwarves, you're going to be charged. This is not a problem. And do you know what I say to you veteran dwarf players? You're absolutely right. Hammerers clearly are an upgrade over Longbeards, an upgrade you're certainly justified in taking. But here's my point back to you. Why are we picking? Why not take both? Hammerers go in your special section, and you take Longbeards in your core because you take that king. And that way, when the opponent charges into you, it doesn't matter which part of your line they hit. Whether it's the Longbeards, whether it's the hammers, it doesn't matter. Wherever they charge, they are hitting very durable dwarf infantry with amazing weapon skill and some really good damage output to boot as well. Personally, I think if you took both hammerers and Longbeards, it would be such a dilemma for your opponent because you're going to be out shooting him with your war machines anyway, and now he's got to try and get into combat with you to even the odds, but he's not even guaranteed to be winning them combats either. It makes it so your opponent is stuck between a rock and a hard place. Well, at least that's what I think. But of course, all of this is just like my opinion, man. Let me know what you think down in the comment section below. Are you a fan of Longbeards? Do you think they should be the go-to core infantry for the dwarves? Or do you disagree? Are you taking something else as your general? You're not taking a king. And if so, what are you taking as your core? And do Longbeards still have a place in your army at that point? If you enjoyed today's video, don't forget to smash that like button and also subscribe to never miss an episode. Would you like to know more? If so, then please consider becoming a channel member or patron. By supporting the channel, not only will you be doing your part, but you'll also be helping me create more content for your viewing pleasure and unlocking a whole host of perks. You get everything from a badge next to your name, custom emojis, but the big one is access to the Mordian Glory Discord server, an online community with almost 2,500 active members. It's always popping off in the MG Discord. We've got channels for army lists, hobbying, tactics, stories, and even a pretty spicy meme section as well. For all you greenhorns that wanted to see the Mordian glory hole, today is your lucky day. And joking aside, I do want to say a massive thank you to all of the current channel members and patrons. You guys are amazing, truly the lifeblood of the channel. I could not do Mordian Glory full time without the incredible and generous support of my members, so thank you guys so much. And last, but certainly not least, I want to say a personal thank you to all of my top tier Patreons. These are the War Masters, the people who have truly gone above and beyond the Call of Duty. So a heartfelt thank you to Alex Dengal, Bon Vert, Mad Larkin, Marcus Roberts, Mark Panconi, RJ Scorpion, Swordfish Trombone, Try Again Bragg, John Stubbs, Nick Walsh, Diesel Fox, and August Barney. Seriously guys, thank you from the bottom of my heart. Your support is incredible and it makes a huge difference. Thank you so much. That's all for now. Hope you've all enjoyed today's video, and of course, as always, see you guys next time.